Ladies and gentlemen, Sean O'Malley is the truth. He is the best in the world right now, and the way he flustered Aljamain Sterling with his feints and movement before stopping him like Conor McGregor knocked Jose Aldo out was a sight to behold. O'Malley's potential for superstardom is insane, especially after UFC 292. But how did he get here? From finding MMA disgusting to becoming a UFC champion, this is O'Malley's incredible journey. Growing up, Sean O'Malley hated mixed martial arts. As any regular 12-year-old, O'Malley never understood why his father and brothers, who were hardcore MMA fans, enjoyed human beings going through hell inside the cage. O'Malley never understood why MMA fighters would put their bodies on the line to fill the appetites of violence, hungry couch potatoes who wouldn't think twice about dumping them the moment they started losing. None of that made any sense to little Sean, but as years passed by, MMA gods started sending him signs of what was yet to come. In school, O'Malley wasn't the brightest kid. He hated it more than his father's love affair with combat sports. So in his sophomore year, he decided to drop out. I mean, why would he waste his time learning things he'd forget the moment he walked out? A few months after O'Malley turned 15, destiny knocked on his door. At times, life takes you places that are predetermined or guided by some external force or higher power. And in O'Malley's case, it proved to be true. Call it divine intervention, luck, or accident. O'Malley discovered martial arts when a friend invited him to train at a fighting gym in his hometown of Helena, Montana. The moment O'Malley stepped inside the gym, it was love at first sight. O'Malley's gifted skill set was evident through his early success in kickboxing, where he cleaned the clock of dozens of hopefuls with his long limbs, precision, power, and agility. Suga was so good at kickboxing that he would have been a multiple division champion by now had he not quit, but it simply wasn't meant to be. O'Malley knew he needed a bigger challenge to make the most of his physical gifts. And that challenge was mixed martial arts, where one moment you're dominating, and the other moment you are lying on the canvas staring into the abyss. MMA is a brutal and unforgiving world, but O'Malley wanted to test himself regardless. Sean's MMA journey started as an amateur, where he gradually progressed as a fighter by taking out all but 2 opponents. After a couple of years in amateur circuits, O'Malley turned pro and continued to impress his admirers, as well as silence his naysayers. As the bantamweight sensation climbed up the MMA ladder, one step at a time, he caught the attention of the UFC's main man, Dana White, who invited him to audition for the Contender Series. It was in his Dana White Contender Series debut that O'Malley learned a harsh lesson that to make his dream come true, he needed to be heartless enough to take everything his opponent had been working for. Sean's opponent, Alfred Kashakian, wanted to rip him to shreds too, so it was fair in a way. The fight was pretty competitive. Kashakian took O'Malley down multiple times, and even managed to rattle the American's brain cells a few times on the feet. But O'Malley's feints, striking repertoire, and deceptive power were too hot to handle. The finish came in the final minute of round 1, when O'Malley knocked Kashakian out cold with a straight punch. Dana White was over the moon for having signed the cash cow. But as impressive as O'Malley was, in his Dana White Contender Series debut, he failed to live up to the hype in his first 2 UFC fights. Though O'Malley was victorious in both bouts, he failed to earn many style points with those performances. In his first UFC fight against Tyrion Ware, O'Malley was pushed to his limit. He was brutally beaten in the 2nd round, but his consistent work won him the 1st and 3rd rounds on 2 scorecards. O'Malley's 2nd UFC fight was even worse. though he was in cruise control against Andre Suga at UFC 222. A foot injury late in the second round changed the complexion of the fight completely. O'Malley struggled to stay on his feet, so Suga took him down and controlled him for the remainder of the fight. But because he couldn't make the most of his opportunity, O'Malley won 2-1 to stay undefeated. It's true that adversity is often tough to deal with, but it's equally as important as success, as it helps people push through their comfort zones, develop resilience, and learn from their experiences. On the outside, O'Malley may look like a spoiled brat who walks around talking smack to people, but on the inside, he's smart and calculated. He knows his potential and his limits, so he took some time off from fighting after UFC 222, healed completely, and then bounced back in a fashion that only Suga could. At UFC 248, O'Malley returned to action against Jose Alberto Quinones, and he started the fight with a fake glove touch, followed by a leg kick. For 1.5 minutes, O'Malley threw whatever he could at Quinones, frustrating him to the point that he had no option but to charge forward with reckless abandon, a grave miscalculation against a striker of O'Malley caliber. Quinones tried to put O'Malley on the back foot and land a big shot, but O'Malley shoved him away like he was a random dude from the streets. As soon as Quinones got up, O'Malley landed a crushing head kick, followed by an uppercut, and that is all she wrote. 3 months later, O'Malley dispatched Eddie Wineland in a violent fashion. The veteran bantamweight was fearless as he walked O'Malley down with relentless pressure, even managing to land a few big shots that made fight fans jump out of their seats. O'Malley was patient like a gentle breeze on a summer evening, and he subtly made his reads with feints and jabs. Late in the second round, O'Malley snapped with a combination of strikes that tested Wineland's toughness, and moments later, a straight right sent the veteran to a place where time doesn't exist. With his win over Wineland, O'Malley was 12-0 and perhaps on top of the world, but just when he thought the sky was the limit for him, his past came back to haunt him. 2 months after dispatching Wineland, O'Malley faced the toughest test of his career in Marlon Vera at UFC 252. For the first few minutes, O'Malley had things under control. He was managing distance well, throwing feints and outboxing Vera, but the Ecuadorian was doing more damage by chopping the bantamweight star's leg down with low kicks. In the latter part of the round, one of Vera's low kicks damaged O'Malley's peroneal nerve, sending him crashing to the canvas. Unlike Suga, Vera followed and unleashed vicious elbows from top to hand O'Malley, his first career loss. 7 months later, O'Malley made his return to fighting and put on a striking clinic against Thomas Almeida, stopping him in the 3rd round at UFC 260. In his next fight, O'Malley produced one of the best performances inside the cage. At UFC 264, O'Malley was scheduled to face Louis Smolka, but he pulled out due to injury. And in came promotional newcomer, Chris Moutinho, who left the cage bruised and battered. Moutinho had a few impressive wins in local circuits, but his skill set was nothing that could trouble O'Malley, who was light years ahead of the American Portuguese. Suga shone through every strike in his tool bag at Moutinho, who showed a ton of resilience and heart. O'Malley landed a total of 230 significant strikes on Moutinho that night, but the latter still came forward, trying to earn that Hail Mary knockout and hit the jackpot. It wasn't meant to be, as Moutinho was put out of his misery 30 seconds before the end of the fight. 5 months later, O'Malley battered Raulian Paiva at UFC 269 using his lanky frame and distance management. The American's jab and footwork were on another level that night. He danced around the octagon while putting pain on his opponent. But he was kind enough to put him out of his misery late in the first round with a crushing right hand followed by ground and pound. At 15-1, you'd think O'Malley had earned his keep, but we MMA fans are hard to please. If we don't like someone, we always find ifs and buts to undermine their achievements. And in O'Malley's case, the biggest but was the level of competition he was facing. So to put an end to the only narrative that marred his legacy, O'Malley decided to face a step up in competition at UFC 276, where he faced perennial bantamweight contender Pedro Munhoz. The fight was close until it ended with an unintentional eye poke, so a rematch was the way forward, one would think. But instead of running it back with Munhoz, O'Malley accepted a title eliminator against former champion and the #1 bantamweight at that time, Peter No Mercy Yan at UFC 280. The fight was as advertised, a barn buster between two of the most technically gifted strikers in the world. In round 1, Yan was the aggressor, but as soon as O'Malley landed a crisp right hand in the second minute, the Russian shifted strategies and resorted to mixing striking with wrestling to neutralize Suga's threat on the feet. The second round was wild. O'Malley badly rocked Yan in the opening seconds, but couldn't finish him. Seconds later, Yan returned the favor and stunned O'Malley before taking him down. Round 3 was razor close, with both men having their moments, although O'Malley produced the biggest moment, a big knee to the face of Yan that bloodied him up. At the end of round 3, the fight was anyone's to take. Most fight fans had Yan winning. O'Malley rise to the throne was a walk in the park. At UFC 292, O'Malley faced Aljamain Sterling for the UFC bantamweight title. The challenger was a sizable underdog. He was expected to get blown away by the champ, but he turned the tables and blew everyone out of the water. In the first round, O'Malley managed range and distance to perfection. Sterling couldn't touch him on the feet, so he decided to take the fight to the ground. He failed in doing so as well. O'Malley's takedown defense was way better than Sterling expected. In the second round, Sterling grew frustrated and charged forward with reckless abandon. O'Malley connected with a big right hand to drop the champion face first onto the canvas. A few seconds later, we entered the Suga era. O'Malley's stoppage victory reminded everyone from the broadcast team to MMA fans of Conor McGregor's featherweight title victory against Jose Aldo. And why wouldn't it? The man is a star, but with great power comes great responsibility. Winning a belt is tough in mixed martial arts. Defending it far tougher, and O'Malley's performances as the champion will determine his career trajectory. With fighters like Merab Dvalishvili and Marlon Vera waiting to get their hands on the newly crowned champion, things will get chaotic. Will Sean O'Malley be known as the greatest bantamweight of all time when all is said and done? We are yet to find out, but for now,
Welcome to the Sugar Show.